So 7.2.5 and Tomb of Sargeras are coming out, and that means it's time for their Elemental Shaman guide. And as usual, this guide is based on stormwithinlava.com. If you haven't checked that out and you are watching on YouTube, definitely check the link in the description to go straight there and read up on it. And as usual, as videos cannot really be updated after the fact, if anything major changes, definitely check out the text on the site to make sure nothing major has changed. But in this guide, I'm going to be talking about the talents, the stats, and the rotation that you want to be using for Elemental Shaman in Tomb of Sargeras in 7.2.5. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So there are currently 4 popular talent builds. Their names are basically Ascendance build, Lightning Rod build, Ice Fury build, and the Mythic Plus build. Looking at the talents, there are uses for things outside of this build, but it's pretty rare, so we're mostly going to be focusing on these 4 builds. So pretty much all these builds use the first 4 talents as the same. Granted, the second and third tier are pretty much irrelevant to damage, but there are some uses where we're going to kind of briefly talk about what you could do here. So for the level 15 talent tier, Path of Flame is better for people with very high levels of mastery when using Ascendance. But once you get the tier 22 set, assuming this doesn't get changed from the flame shock damage, the Totem Mastery talent is going to be better in pretty much all situations unless you have obscenely high mastery, like way over the ceiling of 86.5% with Elemental Blast. The tier 30, Gust of Wind is pretty much the go-to if you really need healing and you're able to AoE with Stormkeeper at the same time as you need healing. Ancestral Guidance can be very nice as a emergency cooldown. Windrush Totem, I mean, it's pretty obvious you use this if you need to give AoE speed boost. The 45 talent tier, it basically depends on what you need. I would never suggest ever going Voodoo Totem though, because it just kind of sucks. The one thing Voodoo Totem can do is an emergency interrupt on something that can be hexed, but you could also just interrupt it. That's kind of what you're good at, so Earthbind Totem for rooting, Latent Surge Totem for stunning. One thing every single build has in common, Ancestral Swiftness. You pretty much never use either of these other 2 talents. You might use this if you really need emergency burst damage, and you don't care about the overall damage, it's all about that burst. And Aftershock pretty much sees no use as of right now. 75 talent tier, pretty much always Elemental Blast. Primal Elementalist is going to be better if you just aren't very good at Elemental Blast, if you're not willing to practice the constantly using this on cooldown, because delaying this very much, pretty big DPS loss. So if you really aren't good at that and don't care to learn about it, Primal Elementalist could be better. And theoretically, Elemental Fusion should be okay on council fights, but right now it's not currently better on anything in particular that we see anyway, so our advice is to go Elemental Blast always on this tier. Level 90 tier, for single target, you're always going to be using Echo of the Elements. If you have the Legendary Ring, Soul of the... that's the wrong one. Legendary Ring, Soul of the Farseer, wherever that thing happens to be in my bags. Basically what it does is it gives you Echo of the Elements. So if you have that, use the Liquid Magma Totem even on single target, because Storm Elemental currently sucks. Right now, obviously, as I said earlier, if buffs go out for Storm Elemental or something, go check out the website to make sure that we still suggest the same thing. But as of right now, Storm Elemental is not even a DPS increase, so you never want to use Storm Elemental ever. And there's the ring. The level 100 talents are pretty much what defines the build. So these talents are all actually identical for every build except for the Mythic Plus build, and then each build has its own level 100 talent in a different rotation. As you might have guessed, the Ascendance build has Ascendance, the Lightning Rod build has Lightning Rod, and the Ice Fury build uses Ice Fury. The only difference with the Mythic Plus build is you're going to be using Lightning Rod and Liquid Magma Totem. That is for AoE mostly. And in Mythic Plus, we always recommend using this build unless you really need single target damage. And even then, you could probably just use this ring if you have it and really make up for that loss with the Ascendance missing. The Lightning Rod really isn't far behind at all on single target. So now you might be wondering, we have all these builds, when do I use which one? And basically it comes down to preference for the most part. Ascendance is a very burst-centric build that generally keeps up on single target. the biggest important part of Ascendance is being able to stand still and turret for the duration of Ascendance. Lightning Rod is a more consistent build that also keeps up on single target, but generally you're using Lightning Rod for cleave or AoE, like bosses that have more than one target sometimes that aren't really full AoE, but like you still cleave a lot because Chain Lightning really adds up with Lightning Rod. Ice Fury is a very, very consistent. Every 30 seconds you have a nice little burst period, but the rotation is significantly harder to manage, and the damage, well, I won't comment on the damage, but unless you're very comfortable with Ice Fury, you're not going to see any increase by using it, even if it is better. So, generally, the suggestion is to stick to Ascendance and Lightning Rod unless you're very comfortable with Ice Fury, in which case you can try it. Ice Fury is generally better for heavy movement fights because you have the 4 Frost Shocks that you can use on the move. Then, of course, the Mythic Plus build is used in Mythic Plus dungeons and on bosses with significant AoE, such as like Spellblade Allurial, Nighthold, or whatever. So now that we've discussed what the builds are and what they do, let's talk about the stat ratios for each build. So before I get into this, I just want to mention that these are stat ratios, not stat priorities, and not stat weights. I will explain the difference in a moment, but I need an example. So, Ice Fury. For every X critical strike you have, you want 0.6 mastery, 0.4 versatility, and 0.25 haste. What does this mean? So, in my example, I have 10,000 crit right now. I would want 6,500 mastery, 4,000 versatility, and 2,500 haste to go with my 10,000 crit. And if I had 1,000 crit, I would want 650 mastery, 400 versatility, 250 haste. Basically, no matter what the number is, you want this ratio of stats because it's just kind of the ratio that lines up best. The stats work together very well, and you want a very good balance of the stats. So that's what the stat ratios are in a nutshell. Moving on, keeping that in mind, Ascendance, for every X mastery you want 0.97 crit, 0.68 versatility, and 0.35 haste, so you basically want to keep your mastery and crit about equal. For Lightning Rod, for every X crit you want 0.82 mastery, 0.42 versatility, and 0.39 haste. One thing that all these builds share is that they all use Elemental Blast, so mastery over 100% is completely useless. Elemental Blast makes this a little lower, because if you get a mastery proc from the Elemental Blast cast, it'll put you over 100% mastery if you're at 86.5% mastery or higher, so that is a cap that you do not want to go over. I want to stress that this is not something you want to get to. This is not a goal. There's nothing that benefits you from reaching this cap. It's just something to not go over. In fact, getting close to it is kind of awkward, so you probably want to avoid that. So for the AoE stat ratio, it does kind of depend on the context, how long the AoE is going to last, how many targets there are, but as a good point of reference, you basically want to keep your crit and haste about equal, and then your versatility and mastery at about 20% of your crit and haste. So in ratio terms, this means for every X crit you want X haste, or 0.90 haste, or whatever, and 0.2 versatility and 0.2 mastery. So just as a point of reference, just a general guideline, that is the ratio for AoE. So now that you know what the builds are and how to gear for them, now it's time to learn how to play them. So the normal rotation for Elemental Shaman is actually fairly simple, especially just plain single target. The very basis of the rotation is, most importantly, keep Flame Shock on the target at all times. If Flame Shock is below 10 seconds, you can refresh it and it'll pandemic back up to the original duration plus the extra 9 seconds, so you're not actually losing anything if you refresh it at 9 seconds or less. So you definitely want to take advantage of that, and you want to get an Elemental Focus buff on your Flame Shock to make it tick harder, especially if you have the 2 set for Tomb of Sargeras, and 4 set too, I guess, but 2 set, it's going to make this hit significantly harder. So most importantly is you want to make sure your Flame Shock's always ticking on the target, and if you have a good opportunity, refresh it like this, and you're going to prevent a lot of stress in the future of trying to keep it up but not having a buff up or whatever, not having enough Maelstrom. Second most importantly is keeping your totems out, assuming you're speccing Totem Mastery, which most people will be. if there's less than 3 seconds on this remaining, you want to put it down as soon as possible. Most you can do is, like, if you have Elemental Blast come up, you want to finish that cast or whatever. And you always want to make sure this is up for the full duration of Ascendance, so you don't have to refresh it mid-Ascendance. So let's say you're about to pop Ascendance, and your totems have... Oh, my glove just procced. And your totems have less than 15 seconds remaining. You should just drop it. Even less than 20 seconds, because sometimes you get, like, Power of the Maelstrom SK or whatever. You really don't want to be spending time stopping to put down totems. But anyways, next most important is Elemental Blast. You want to be casting this on cooldown as much as possible. Ideally, with the Flame Shock thing, you will look like this. You have 7 seconds left. You can kind of finish casting Elemental Blast, you can finish casting Lava Burst, and you can refresh it there. So Elemental Blast should be something you can pretty much always cast on cooldown if you set it up right. And then next important is you're getting kind of high on Maelstrom. Oh, I'm over... Oh, now I'm capped. So you want to make sure you don't overcap. So Earth Shock is very important to use when you're at or above 117 Maelstrom, because 117 is basically the point where any more casts and you're going to go over. Next, most importantly, is a situation we actually just saw, where if you have Power of the Maelstrom proc, which I'm not going to even try to get on demand, but if you have Power of the Maelstrom proc and Stormkeeper is active, you want to be using Lightning Bolt to get that out immediately, because Power of the Maelstrom falls off. With Stormkeeper, that's a huge loss in damage. But I do want to emphasize that just because this is a big thing does not mean that you should be saving Stormkeeper for Power of the Maelstrom, unless, of course, you will only have one more use of Stormkeeper anyway. Like, for example, the boss is going to die in 40 seconds. Stormkeeper comes off cooldown, you can save it as long as you want and try to get Power of the Maelstrom. Anyways, a little off topic now. Next on the priority list is Earth Shock when at or above 111 Maelstrom, and Lava Surge is not currently active. Reason for this is just you don't want to get other Lava Surge proc to override this one, and 111 Maelstrom is not enough to overcap during the time the Lava Burst is hitting the target. You can also usually get Earth Shock out before it overloads, if it's going to overload, which would prevent overcapping. So next on the list is using Stormkeeper if you can get all 3 charges out. If you cannot get all 3 charges out, you probably just want to save it until you can, and then just cast Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt as a filler. If you're talented into Liquid Magma Totem, even on single target, use this thing on cooldown, unless more targets are going to be coming out. If more targets are going to be coming out, then save it for the additional targets. And Elemental Mastery, you want to cast it also on cooldown. Do not save the second one. Like, the first one's going to line up with Ascendance. Don't try and save the second one for Ascendance, but the third one should line up with Ascendance as well. So basically, if it lines up, perfect. If it doesn't, don't go out of your way to make it, unless it's same situation as Stormkeeper, unless it's going to be your last use anyway. Before moving on to Ice Fury, just for clarification's sake, yes, you do want to use Elemental Blast, and yes, you do want to use Earth Shock in Ascendance. Now, that rotation I listed didn't show anything about Ice Fury, that's just the basic rotation. If you have Ice Fury talented, everything's the same, except just after Elemental Blast on the priority is going to be casting Ice Fury if you will not overcap in doing so. So at 101 Maelstrom or less, and you have to make sure you're going to be capable of getting all 4 Ice Fury charges out. Like, if the boss is about to go immune, don't cast Ice Fury. And then 5th on the rotation is using Ice Fury if you have 20 Maelstrom, and, oh, not Ice Fury, using Frost Shock if you have 20 Maelstrom and a charge of Ice Fury. You can try and min-max this by making sure you have a proc from Elemental Focus. It will end up making you do a little more damage with the Frost Shocks, but this is very complicated to do at times, and if you weren't super familiar with it, you should probably not even try. And I just want to clarify that if you're at 117 Maelstrom and you have an Ice Fury charge, use Frost Shock to dump the Maelstrom, not Earth Shock, or you may run out of time. So adding targets does add some changes to the rotation. So let's get into that. 2 targets, you want to cast Flame Shock and maintain it on both targets, the same way you would with 1 target. You will replace Earth Shock with Earthquake, specifically if you have the Seismic Storm trait. You will replace Lightning Bolt with Chain Lightning, but if you have a Power of the Maelstrom proc, you will still use Lightning Bolt, and then you just do the single target rotation from there. You just make a couple replacements. On 3 targets, if you have Liquid Magma Totem talented, you're going to be using that for your main ability priority, I guess. Your second priority is going to be using Elemental Blast. You will maintain Flame Shock on all 3 targets the same way you would on 1 target. You will use Earthquake for your Maelstrom dump. You will not use any Lightning Bolt, you will only use Chain Lightning for your filler. And you will only Lava Burst if you have a Lava Surge proc. No hard casting it. And on 4 targets, Liquid Magma Totem, Earthquake for your Maelstrom dump, and Chain Lightning only. No Lava Burst, no Flame Shock, no Elemental Blast, nothing else. So a quick look at using your cooldowns before I go into the openers. Ascendance, you basically want to use this as much as you can, but make sure you aren't going to be using it right before a big movement. Like for example on Crosis, you would not use it right before a beam unless you were on the safe side, and you knew you were on the safe side. But you want to be making sure you can use as many ascendances as possible. So if you're only going to get 2 or whatever, you can save it as long as you want. But if you're going to maybe get a third one, if you use it on cooldown, you might just want to use it even if you are going to have to move for part of it, because you're going to make up for that later by getting another use. Stormkeeper is a very unique cooldown. I'm going to say that right off the bat. It benefits AoE significantly more than it benefits single target. So if there are ad spawns in the fight, it is very, very common that it is worth saving, even if you're going to be losing a use overall, to use on these ads. So if there's going to be ads, definitely experiment with just saving the Stormkeeper and using it on the ads, and you'll see your damage skyrocket, and you're going to help the raid out by killing all the ads, and everyone else that wants the parse is going to hate you. But that's okay, because you're helping the mechanics. Fire Elemental is also a somewhat unique cooldown in the sense that you don't just strictly use it on cooldown, like a lot of people's cooldowns. You want to use Fire Ele with buffs, like use the first one with your first potion, so that one's being buffed, and the second one, you generally don't get 3. If you get 3, it's a pretty long fight. And even if you do get 3, it's long enough you're probably going to always going to get 3. But the second one you want to either use with your second potion or Heroism or something. You generally don't want to hold it long enough. Well, you never really want to hold it long enough that you're going to be losing a use. But if possible, you want to be holding it to use with Heroism or a potion or something like that. And to clarify on Fire Ele, losing a use means actually losing a use and not as losing a button press. If you hit Fire Ele and the boss only has 30% health left, I don't really consider that a use because it's only going to get 1 or 2 casts off. So before talking about openers, I just want to kind of get this out of the way. Openers are very insignificant to your overall DPS compared to like other specs or even previous expansions for every spec. And openers are essentially just doing your rotation, but from the start. But a lot of people still get a little confused on their opener. So we're going to start with the Ascendance opener. Lightning Rod opener is literally just doing your rotation. You just apply Flame Shock and do what you normally would do. But Ascendance, you want to have your Totem Mastery stuff down, your totems down before the pull. If you can, use Fire Ele before the pull. For some reason he's really aggressive and doesn't want to go before the pull for me. But if you have the macro and it works for you, you can pop him before the pull too. Then you're going to want to pre-pot. See, he's already attacking. Cast Elemental Blast, Flame Shock once, put out both your Lava Bursts, and then Flame Shock again, and then pop Ascendance. The reason you did the second Flame Shock is to get it long enough for the full Ascendance, and you also got the Lava Burst to buff Elemental Focus, which allows you not to have to refresh this for a while. And then you just do your normal rotation, and after Ascendance, you can finish the Lava Bursts, because Ascendance refresh the Lava Burst charges, and then you use Stormkeeper, and you almost always have Power of the Maelstrom proc, so that's a really nice benefit of using Ascendance. And that is the basic Ascendance opener. Not too terribly hard. So Ice Fury opener is, well, it's not always, but it can be very complicated and very intimidating. So this first opener I'm going to show you guys is the basic one that I recommend for beginners to get more used to the Ice Fury rotation, as my chair is speaking up. So basically, you're going to be doing the same thing. If I had Fire Ele up, I would use it right here, Totem Mastery, pre-pot, Elemental Blast, Flame Shock, and you usually cast Ice Fury, cast a Lava Burst, and start dumping these charges, cast Stormkeeper, open the charges, basically just doing your rotation. So Elemental Blast again, refresh this, Lava Burst, you have just enough time to get this one out, and then you can dump the Stormkeeper charges. Make sure you don't ever lose the charge though, but you're always going to get quite close because you have 2 different things to manage at the same time, and sometimes you're going to have to just Fight the bullet and cast Lightning Bolt or Frost Shock instead of Lava Burst or something. You're going to have to go out of rotation to maximize your actual damage output, because sometimes things don't always go according to plan, but generally you can just kind of follow the rotation unless you get a bunch of procs or something, and everything will be fine. And I just got an Ascendance proc off of Frost Shock. That is really awkward. But anyway, moving on, I have my own opener that I do that is a lot more complicated and a lot more intimidating, but if you're a veteran player and really want to maximize your opener potential, this is the one I would probably do. It's pretty similar, but a little more scary. So, let's go to that. The big telltale difference between my opener and the beginner opener is that I cast Ice Fury in Stormkeeper, like, immediately. There's no delay. I just kind of go straight into it. And the reason for this is I want to get them on cooldown as quick as possible and get them rolling. And the Stormkeeper is actually really nice for getting the crit buff on your Frost Shocks, the Elemental Focus buff. And I also went ahead and took off the gloves because that was really awkward. I don't want that to have to happen again. But let's go ahead and do that opener. Do the normal opener. Elemental Blast, Flame Shock. I usually cast Lava Burst first to get the crit, but I actually already crit anyway because the Elemental was out. Kind of forgot about that. Fresh to Flame Shock. Both these are up. I also got a Stormkeeper proc, or a Power the Monster proc. And I did mess up my rotation a little bit there by casting Lava Burst instead of Elemental Blast. But as you can see, this one actually went pretty smooth. So I got convenient procs at the right times. But that can get really, really complicated because you're running out of time. You have very, very limited time to do this. So it's kind of scary, but if you really want to maximize it and you're a veteran player, I recommend giving it a shot. Let's casting these two right off the bat. So that covers everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, hopefully you guys learned something. As I've said a couple times now, if you want more Elemental Shaman guides, and all the other information, all of it written down, up to date all the time, check out the stormwithinlava.com link in the description. And my channel also has a lot of Elemental Shaman content on it if you want to see that as well. So make sure you subscribe, like the video if you liked it, all that other stuff. So again, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you guys next time.